We are live from Gillette Stadium. It's the Football with Faria show. First time we're doing this for a little Jets pregame. We're going to talk a lot about what the Jets are going to be doing today, a lot of things that could happen coming up in the next couple of weeks. But first, let's get this intro started.
It's time for Football with Faria.
You got to get the offense right, and you got to be able to be aggressive. They put up 14 against the secondary. That is driving me up a freaking wall right now.
Now here's your host, Nick Faria.
And again, welcome inside Football with Faria, first podcast show of the year. We're live from Gillette Stadium, just about 2 hours away from kickoff between the New York Jets and New England Patriots. I am your host, Nick Faria, of course. Thank you guys so much for jumping back in. I know a lot of you Jet fans have seen me on the Jake Asman show, and very happy to be having my own show here to sort of talk football, talk Jets, talk some Eagles. But today is solely focused on these New York Jets and Gang Green. Final game of the year against their arch rival, the New England Patriots, 6-10 on the season. A lot of draft implications coming up for a game like this. A lot of things to talk about, a lot of things to get to. But first, let's go with some of the bigger takeaways that we saw from Saturday's game again for Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens. You have It was Mason Rudolph and the Steelers being able to beat the Baltimore Ravens 17-10. They have not exactly punched their ticket yet into the playoffs for the AFC side. They're going to need some help today with a Buffalo loss, a Jacksonville Jaguars loss. But that was an impressive win by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Very much needed. Get to 10 wins once again with the Mike Tomlin era. We'll get to Tomlin and the Jets and all that other stuff later on in the show. I know a lot of people have been debating about Mike Tomlin, and not a lot of people like my take about Tomlin, but that's okay. This is why this show is here. Again, this is Football with Faria. First time we're doing a pregame show. Finally, back here in the press booth for Gillette Stadium between the Patriots and the Jets. But let's talk about these Jets now, because this season has not gone the way a lot of people would have hoped. Not a lot of people are excited about the future. A lot of people are concerned about where this team is going to go in the next couple of years with Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas. We're going to get to all of that throughout this show. I think we're going to be staying on for about an hour. But if you have a call, it should have it on the bio link for YouTube, and you can always check in, call in, ask some questions if you want. I see a few people already are on this stream. Very, very thankful. Thankful for all of you guys that have been fans of me since I jumped on this Jets beat from the beginning. It's been a lot of fun. The fact that the season is coming to a close is pretty sad, but at the same time, a lot of stuff that we can get to, a lot of stuff that I think we'll be able to continue moving forward. I'll be talking about the Jets pretty much all off season, where they're going to go for the draft, what they're going to do in free agency. There's going to be a lot of questions in free agency. Will Bryce Huff return? What are they going to do with Mekhi Becton? What are they going to do with backup quarterback? A lot of different questions are going to come up in the coming weeks, and we'll get to that all. I'd love to do a show maybe once every day, probably in the late afternoon, and then we'll continue with that. But first, let's talk about these Jets here. Obviously, the season not exactly the way a lot of people wanted to go. Expectations with Aaron Rodgers were sky high beginning of the year, preseason. That first touchdown drive that Rodgers had was pretty damn special, pretty damn awesome. And it made a lot of people excited about what the season could become. And then obviously all that gets taken away 4 plays in. And as we prepare for this Week 18 matchup, you kind of look back and you think about all the craziness that has happened to this point, because this was a team that talent-wise is good enough to make the playoffs and was always going to be good enough to make the playoffs. They're 6-10. They're not 4-12. They're not 3-13. They're 6-10, and they've lost multiple games because the offense did not put up enough points. We talk about, 3-3 when they held offenses to under 20 points. That's just unacceptable. You hold an offense at 20 points in the modern era, you should be able to win that game. And unfortunately, the Jets were not able to do so at a consistent level, and that's why they are where they are. It's part of the problem, and there's going to be a lot of questions about the future of this offense and what Aaron Rodgers can do to fix these problems and probably number one on that list is the offensive line. I know a lot of people are upset with the offensive line and the structure, the way that they were built, cut blocks and all that other stuff. Those concerns at the beginning of the year that a lot of people had really came to rear its ugly head throughout the season. We're talking about 13 different offensive linemen. Today is going to be the 13th different combination with Jacob Hansen out with a concussion. Most likely Xavier Newman is going to get the start at right guard. We're going to have Carter Warren at tackle. There's a lot of problems along this offensive line. There have been a lot of problems with this offensive line, and it's just par for the course with a team that has been dealing with injuries the last few years. And it really just is completely unacceptable when you think about where this team could have been this year. Could they be a Cleveland Browns type team, 10 wins without their starting quarterback, get to the postseason? I think certainly that is part of the conversation that's going to be had over the next couple of weeks. And we know Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas are going to be safe in 2024. But that necessarily doesn't mean that everything is going to be good and that all these answers are going to be solved. There's going to be a lot of soul searching that needs to happen over the next couple of weeks for the Jets and for the Jets' future. And we'll get to some of that as well throughout the course of the week and sometimes today as well. But the one thing I do want to talk about in our year in review are some of the positive things. And I know a lot of Jet fans, they don't want to hear the positive. They want to talk about what's going wrong and how do you fix it. And I totally get it. But there were some positives, and there were actually plenty of positives for this organization over the last year, since the Aaron Rodgers trade. So I do want to get to some of that. First off, Garrett Wilson has had a terrific season. Closing in on 100-catch season along with 1,000 yards, back-to-back 1,000 yards to start his NFL career. That's just spectacular. He's been special. And the other thing that I think not a lot of people talk about is the fact that he is such an incredible professional and leader. He could easily go out there and talk, and complain nonstop about things that aren't going right. And with 4 different quarterbacks out there, it's easy for a receiver to get frustrated. And we saw Garrett kind of get frustrated throughout the year, but he was very, very more reserved throughout the year. He was always trying to figure out ways to get better. It's really just unfortunate the fact that Garrett has been given and been dealt a hand this bad to start his career, but he has been absolutely spectacular. Again, like I said, 7 catches away in this game today from getting a 100-catch, 1,000-yard season, which are all Pro Bowl numbers for any top receiver in the league. So I think that obviously 100% is the number one positive with this team. The number 2 positive, I think, has happened the last couple of weeks, and that is the changes that have been made by the Jets offense. Breece Hall is starting to be more of a target in the backfield as a receiving threat. That's another positive. I know a lot of people don't think so, but when you look at what the Jets are going to try to do next year with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, you need to make sure that you have an offensive system that he can run and can be competent going into next year. And I think ultimately that is something that they can do. And that's something you can take away from in these final weeks, where you saw Breece Hall get some targets in the receiving game. You saw him get some big runs, big stretch runs that I think are going to expand his game next year as he's removed from his ACL surgery. Remember, this is his first year coming off of his surgery. Most running backs, most players, when you have ACL surgery, the people that I've talked to, whether it be medical practitioners, whether it be former players, they all say that first year is the hardest, but the second year is where you really get back to 100%. And I think when you look at what Breece Hall has done to get to this point, the fact that he has looked so good late in the season is great news for 2023. So again, some of the positives here, it's not just all doom and gloom, guys. And I understand a lot of people are going to be frustrated and a lot of people are not happy by what's going on, but there are going to be some things next year when Aaron Rodgers returns that is going to make this team a formidable team to go with. It's really that simple. And you can pick one of 2 sides. You can have, and I always say this when I'm on Jake's show, on all these other different places, you can have 2 different points. You can either be the extreme negative or the extreme positive. And the extreme negative is everything is bad, the coaching staff needs to go, all those issues, all those concerns. But then there's the extreme positive of saying, no, this season was perfectly fine. If you add in context, all of this is going to be excusable, and they're going to be fine and win a championship with Aaron Rodgers next year. There's always a middle ground. And I think it's important, if you're coming onto this show, Football with Faria, if you're coming onto this show for the first time, because this is the first time, I'm going to give you the objective middle, because you can take the left, you can take the right, you can take the negative, you can take the positive, but ultimately there's always a middle ground to some of the things that we're going to be talking about. There's always a middle ground to the concerns or the happy parts of an NFL season. And I think we're going to try to find that over the next couple of weeks. But there are some positives to this team that are going to make them formidable going into next year. The other positive, of course, is the defense. How many teams, how many defenses do you know out there have an all-pro corner, all-pro linebackers, and Pro Bowl all-pro defensive linemen? There's very few. There's very few. Sauce Gardner is an elite player. He's going to the Pro Bowl for the second straight year. We have C.J. Mosley, Quincy Williams, excellent players overall. They're all locked up for the long term. I know C.J. Mosley's contract is going to be a little difficult for the Jets to maneuver, but I think they'll have those conversations later on after the year. And the defensive line, Quinnen Williams, locked up. Jermaine Johnson, locked up. Those are guys, blue chip guys, that you can trust throughout an entire season, over the next couple of years, throughout their careers. And they're going to be Jets for a long time. C.J. Mosley, obviously not so much. He's over 30. But you're still going to have a plethora of linebackers and a plethora of defensive stars. They're going to make this team really, really, really good to watch. Again, this is Football with Faria. We're talking about the positives in the year-end review for the New York Jets. If you guys have a comment, a call-in, do it right now on YouTube. We've got the link in the description below to call in, have some questions. I know we've got a couple questions here. We'll get to all that later on in the show. We talked about the positives. Now let's talk about the negatives, because, again, you got to have that balance. You can't just be all positive. You can't just be all negative. And probably one of the bigger questions is regarding the coaching staff and front office. Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas are going to be back for 2024, confirmed by the New York Post. So what happens next? The one thing that I've heard throughout the time right now, the expectation is no major changes on the offensive side of the football are going to be made. The other side to that coin, though, is what happens next year. Because if Nathaniel Hackett is back, that's fine. You can have those issues, you can have those concerns, but with Aaron Rodgers, you have to think that that play caller is going to be helped out later on. But the big question is going to be on the offensive line. The even bigger question is going to be on the strength and conditioning side. Aaron Rodgers was 39, 40 years old going into this training camp, and he pulled his muscle. He pulled, his calf? What was it, second week of OTAs? That can't happen anymore. It can't. They have to make sure, and they have to go back into the strength and conditioning side and really figure out a plan, not to change things throughout the year as Robert Saleh has done over the last couple of years, but have a consistent plan that's going to work for the entire season. That's something that they haven't been able to do since Saleh took over. And I think they will find a solution here, because they have to. They have to. They can't go through a third season like this where they're just dealing with injury after injury after injury. It's just impossible to handle. So I think strength and conditioning changes are going to be coming, and they need to come in order for the team to be a viable contender. And then I think changes along the offensive line. Keith Carter, I know a lot of people are high on him. Offensive linemen are high on him for his overall staff. But you can't go through the level of turmoil the group has had, I think is the right word to say. But you can't go through the level of turmoil of 13 different players, 13 different combinations, and expect to be successful. So while I know Carter certainly has an excuse, sooner or later the excuses run out, right? It's just the ineffective play of some of these guys. And I think a lot of people can forgive Joe Tippmann for struggling, right? Second round rookie. He's going to go through his licks and his bumps, and he's going to play really well sometimes. He's going to play really bad some other times. He's been about what you can expect from a starting center going into what will be his second year next year. But the thing that can't be excused is the just poor play overall from Mekhi Becton, Laken Tomlinson, veterans that, yes, they've been banged up throughout the year, but these are guys that are veterans. They're returning from last year. They have been in the system all year. They know the communication. And you're seeing just these breakdowns left and right. And I know Rich Cimini today talked about the chances of Mekhi Becton returning to the Jets next season. I know Mekhi wants to be back. He's very high and wants to play with Aaron Rodgers. But the question is, will the Jets, will they want to bring him back? I don't know if that's going to be the case. It doesn't sound like it's going to be the case right now. But I always say maybe Becton back on a one-year deal solves those concerns, solves those problems. You don't really know. It can always be one or two different things. So there's a lot of questions along the offensive line. Keith Carter, I think, is a candidate to, I don't want to say fired, but it's just you have to make a change. You really have to make a change because that's just where we are right now with this team. Because if you're going to go back into next season with no changes made to any of the coaching staff, what does that tell the fan base? We're okay with 7-10 because our quarterback got down. Are you guys really 5 wins better with Aaron Rodgers? I think there's an argument to be made for that, but you need to make sure that you do your due diligence. And the Jets haven't done their due diligence yet, and they're going to this offseason, but you can't go into next season without any plans of solutions, any changes overall. You have to look at changing some things. And the top 2 lists, I've said it on Jake's show, I've said it elsewhere, I think it's going to be surrounding the offensive line and the strength and conditioning side, because this was just a debacle of epic proportions this year overall. Just can't happen. Can't happen the way everything's been going. Again, we are at Gillette Stadium. Nick Faria here on the Football with Faria show. Got a lot to talk about today. We're in the first 15 minutes of the program. We already have some questions. We'll get to those later on in the show. You guys want to call in, definitely go. The link in the description on our YouTube channel has the link there, so you guys should be all set. Just let me know if everything happens. Let me know how the show's going. Would love, obviously, pointers. This is the first one, so we're ironing out a lot of kinks. First thing I want to do, though, is I want to give a big shout out to Gator. Met Gator through Jake's show. I am not a technical person whatsoever, and I was having real trouble creating an opening the last couple of weeks and trying to find those solutions. And you know, I am terrible at graphic design. I'm terrible with software editing, so probably shouldn't be a professor. But hey, that's where we are right now. So I went to Gator, and him and I were talking. And I'm like, I really want to do a show, but I need an open and I need a logo because my logo was, terrible. The opens were just a mess. My wife has her own job, but he comes in and goes out with a great opening. I mean, guys, for those of you that have been on the show since the start here, how great was that open? How great is that logo? That's some really cool stuff right there, right? So big shout out to Gator. And a big thank you as well, because he's such a great guy, and really just a true testament to this Jets fan base. Because when I jumped on the beat, you guys know me. I came in with a Philadelphia Eagles background. Didn't know a lot of people. Didn't know any people per se outside of my friends that are actually Jet fans. So didn't really know what to expect. And you guys have opened your arms to me, and I can't be more thankful for that. And that's why no matter what happens professionally for me, I'm still looking for full-time work. But no matter what happens professionally for me, I will be covering the Jets in some aspect throughout Football with Faria, even if I jump on a different beat. So I want to clear that up right away, that I'm going to be covering the Jets for as long as you'll have me, as long as you guys are willing to have those conversations as well. So very thankful for all of you guys who have jumped on. Big thankfulness to Gator, to Jake, and all my friends and family that are watching currently right now. Again, Football with Faria, about 2.5 hours away from Jets Patriots, week 18 of the NFL season. A lot of stuff to get to today. We've already talked about the year in review and where the Jets are going to go. And before we get even more into the matchup, let's talk about the Pro Bowl. A lot of people don't like the Pro Bowl. I'm one that doesn't like the Pro Bowl anymore. And I was one that, when I was younger growing up, I grew up with the Pro Bowl being a big part of my family. We would watch the Super Bowl. We do all these different things. And we were probably the one family that was watching the Pro Bowl from the beginning to the end. It was a great time. When I was in college, I essentially force feed my friends the entire Pro Bowl. So pretty sad that the game is gone now. I understand why. But for the Jets, they've got a couple Pro Bowlers to their credit. Sauce Gardner being one of them, second straight year with the Pro Bowl. But let's talk about who was snubbed, right? Because there were quite a few snubs on this Jets team. I know they're 6-10, but these guys are pretty damn good. And to only have 2 Pro Bowl players, and Sauce Gardner being one of them is great. It's fair. But is it worth having the conversation about Garrett Wilson? Should Garrett Wilson have been in the Pro Bowl? 93 catches, 1,000 yards, going to be potentially having a 100-catch season. I certainly think so. I think he got hosed there, and I think probably the biggest one is obviously Quincy Williams. 130 tackles, couple sacks, 10 passes defensed. Really just crazy the fact that this guy is so overlooked at linebacker over and over and over again. He's a player that is going to be around with the Jets for a very long time. He's an all-pro caliber player. And I know a lot of people are sort of overlooking that and sort of overlooking the Pro Bowl itself because, hey, it's the Pro Bowl. Who gives a crap? But I think Quincy himself is going to be an all-pro player this year, and he should be an all-pro player. Rich Roseford, yes, that was Cos. Jets Media's coming in. They're getting their coffee. They're doing all their different stuff. Glad to be back, of course, in this conversation. So very, very excited to be here at Gillette. Very excited to be back on the beat. Very excited to just be here in the football realm, if you will. But going back to the Pro Bowl, I think Quincy Williams, there was an argument for. I think Jermaine Johnson as well. With the season that he's had, career high in sacks, career high in pressures, really good against the run. His career honestly reminds me a lot of what Josh Sweat is going through. Josh Sweat, defensive end for Philadelphia, 10-plus sacks last couple of years, Pro Bowl, all-pro player, has improved his sack total every year leading up to this season. I see Jermaine Johnson as that perfect moldable player that's going to continue to improve every year. I think if we're really going into it, I think there's a chance that he could be in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year next year because of how good he is against the run, because of how good of a pass rusher he is. This is a guy that I think the Jets are going to love for the next couple of years. And how about Will McDonald? Not talking that he should make the Pro Bowl, but you pair him up with a player like Will McDonald, who has shown flashes this year, and you've got a very strong defensive line no matter what happens with Bryce Huff. So, yes, there's going to be a lot of concerns. There's a lot of questions. But there are some Pro Bowl snubs here because the Jets season is not as bad as people want to talk about. And that's just where we are right now. And it's unfortunate that the season has gone to where it is. But ultimately, that's where we're at. It's where we're at. Again, we're closing in on the 11 o'clock mark, 2 hours before kickoff. Football with Faria, the Jets pregame show here today. Thank you guys so much for joining me. We talked about the Pro Bowl, talked about the year in review. We'll talk about grades probably later this week. But how about the big altering question that a lot of people are asking right now, and that's if the Jets should tank? The big question is, should the Jets look to win this game or not? Should they try to lose and improve their draft stock, or should they win and tank their draft stock entirely? It's a debate that a lot of people have had. I've been on record saying that the Jets should absolutely tank for a number of different reasons. And I know a lot of people want to talk about it, and they want to say, well, you play to win the game and everything else, that Herman Edwards quote. Herman Edwards isn't a head coach anymore. Drafting players, especially top 10 picks, is very, very difficult. And when you get an opportunity to do so, you cannot miss your turn. That's something that the Jets have done in the past few years. We talk about the Zach Wilson debate, and we'll get to him throughout this week and the future that he holds and where his future lies. But the Jets that year, 2021, they were in the market for a quarterback. The team was really bad, and they had an opportunity to get the number 1 overall pick, and they finished with 1 win more than the Jacksonville Jaguars. They didn't properly tank enough to get the cream of the crop that was Trevor Lawrence. And if Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback this year for the Jets, if Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback the last couple of years, I think it's a very simple, safe argument that the Jets have already ended their 13-year playoff drought. Trevor Lawrence is really good. He may not be the star that many expected, the messiah that many expected, but he is still an all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber quarterback that can win you a lot of games in this league. Jacksonville is relevant, and they're a dangerous team in the playoffs because of him. Not because of the defense, not because of Calvin Ridley, because of Trevor Lawrence. And this is where tanking is so important. We can argue all the time about the simplicity of it, the safety of it, and you want to keep the locker room together. But this is week 18. We're not talking about tanking in week 12. We're not talking about sitting starters in week 15, 16. We're talking about right now. And this last game of the year against the Patriots team, that is also trying to secure a high draft pick. We're going to get to Bill Belichick in a minute. But if you're the Jets, you want to lose this game. You want to make sure you lose this game to secure a high pick. Right now, they're selected with the 8th overall pick per Tankathon. A loss today could get them into the top 5. A win today can push them back as far as 12th. Talk about the difference between the 5th overall pick and the 12th overall pick. That is the difference between a Joe Alt, Olu Fashanu, Marvin Harrison type player, or Keon Coleman, Malik Neighbors, J.C. Latham. Really good players and Pro Bowl players in their own right. But are they the blue chip talents that you should expect them to have and the blue chip talents that you want to have as a top 5 pick? Do you want Joe Alt securing Aaron Rodgers' blindside, or do you want to solve the right tackle position with a J.C. Latham or some of this other tier tackle positions? I think it's an easy answer. You want to lose this game, and again, the losing streak to the Patriots. I get it. We talk about all those issues. This comment here from Dan: got to break the streak against the Pats. The Jets got Lawrence. They don't get Rodgers. Very fair point. Very fair point, Dan. If they don't successfully take for Lawrence, they don't get Rodgers. But are they not in a better position if they have Trevor Lawrence? I think there's an argument to be made for that. It's not like Robert Saleh is as bad as Urban Meyer was his first year with the Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that was just an absolute cluster, just ridiculousness. Overall, just terrible. So I get it. I understand. You guys want to break the streak, and people are going to want to break the streak, and I get it. I understand it. From a fan base, struggling with different teams, that is completely understandable. But it's about now or the future. You're not going anywhere this year. Do you want to sacrifice the future all-pro player that you could get, or do you want the guy immediately? Perfect example I have that a lot of people kind of argue against is the Philadelphia Eagles example in 2020. They were 4-10-1 going into the final game of the year against the Washington Commanders. Commanders needed a win in order to win the division. The Giants needed a Commanders loss to win the division themselves. And Philadelphia had nothing to play for. If they won the game, I think they would pick as high as, 9th or 10th. And then if they lost, they pick 6th. They go out there, they're in a close game at halftime. And then what happens? They pull Jalen Hurts, they pull some starters, and they lose the game. And everyone was up in arms about the integrity of the game and all those problems that the Eagles caused with that kind of move. But that loss to Washington gave them the opportunity to trade back in the draft, pick up a first-round pick, and still select Devontae Smith in the first round. Devontae Smith now is a Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber wide receiver, and Philadelphia's offense, as bad as it has been and inconsistent as it has been that past season, they're still an elite group. They have talent all over the field. The trade back with Devontae Smith essentially gave him the tools to get A.J. Brown. Think about that. Think about the legitimacy of that year by losing that game to Washington in the final game of the year. By losing that game, you got Devontae Smith, you got A.J. Brown, and Jalen Carter. That's the future of the Philadelphia Eagles right there. And it shows the reason why you want to lose this final game, no matter the cost. No matter the cost. And that's essentially what we're arguing here. It's not so much, and I know a lot of people are talking about, I'm already seeing in the comments, you want to be able to beat the Patriots. You want to beat the Patriots. It's the Patriots. You have to look past the rivalry. It's not about this season. Think about it from a different angle. Let's think about it from a different angle, guys. If the Patriots won this game and the Patriots beat the Jets, they have sacrificed a chance to get the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL draft next year. instead of having to deal with Drake May or Jaden Daniels or any of these other top quarterbacks, you would have a team in the Patriots who does not have solutions on the offensive line, doesn't have solutions on the defensive line or the receiving core, and you would sacrifice that to lose that game because you wouldn't have to play Drake May for 10 years. You wouldn't have to play Caleb Williams for 10 years. You don't have to deal with Jaden Daniels. See the difference? It's not losing to the Patriots. It's blocking them from getting to a point where they can rebuild quicker than you have. That is essentially the question. That's essentially the argument. It's not tanking the final game of the year to just lose and just move over to next year in sad fashion. It's not that. It's securing the best possible future for your team. The Patriots aren't going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. That's not a problem at the end of the year because you have Aaron Rodgers coming back. The Patriots don't have an Aaron Rodgers on their team. Maybe they get Russell Wilson. Maybe they go after a veteran quarterback. But if New England wins this game, they are out of the running for a top 3 quarterback. That is so transformatively important in this debate. It is so important to remember that. It's not losing to the Patriots. It's blocking the chance that they get a top quarterback. I'm interested in your take, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Should the Jets tank? Should they not? I think with Zach Wilson not playing, with the offensive line the way it is, I don't even think they're really going to have to try. I think this is going to be a very ugly game. It is completely snowing right now. Field's not covered, but some of the seats are. Again, we're at Gillette Stadium here covering the Jets-Patriots season finale, talking about the Jets' chances to tank, to not to tank. Very interested to hear what you guys have to say. Personally, I don't think this is even a question. This isn't even a debate. You have to lose this game. You have to lose this game. Have to. You're 6-10. You're not going anywhere this year. You're not going anywhere. It's okay. And the other thing is this. You have the excuse that the Patriots don't. You really do. You went into this season with high expectations. You had Hard Knocks. You had Aaron Rodgers. And you had a very improved roster. And it all washed away. All of it washed away. 13 different offensive linemen have played for you this year. Your franchise quarterback was lost 4 plays in. You have the excuse the Patriots don't have. And that's why it's okay to lose this. You don't have to worry about the integrity and the losing streak. Win or lose, Bill Belichick's career is probably done in Foxborough. Win or lose, he's gone, most likely. And even if he returns, even if Bill Belichick returns, do you trust Aaron Rodgers against Bill Belichick? I would. I would in that matchup, 100%. 100%. Bill Belichick has always struggled against franchise quarterbacks, particularly on the road. Talk about what Peyton Manning has done to that defense in Denver when he was with the Broncos. With Aaron Rodgers on the field, that even if Belichick returns next season, even if he does with the Patriots, it's all washed away because you have Aaron Rodgers and he doesn't. And further expanding the point, right? If the Patriots win this game, they not only lose out on the quarterback, but you also get the opportunity to have Aaron Rodgers play Bill Belichick and Bill Belichick doesn't have his quarterback to grow and build. And he's essentially stuck in the mud for the next 3-4 years. It's not about ending the streak. The streak will be ended next year when Aaron Rodgers is your starting quarterback. That's what we're talking about here. When do you want the streak to end? Now in a meaningless game, or week 3, week 4 of the NFL season in 2024 when you want to win and expand your team and expand your chances into the playoffs? It's a no-brainer to me. It's a no-brainer. You want to lose this game. You need to lose this game. Secure a top 5 pick. Get your offensive lineman. Get your top receiver. And you move into 2024 with a significantly improved team. significantly improved. The defense is locked in. We know we know the Jets have to solve the Bryce Huff question. We know they have to solve what they're going to do along the offensive line, but that can be solved in the draft. That can be solved in free agency. By securing a top 5 pick, you give yourself chances all the way. That's all it is. Another comment here from Dan. Love this one. Nick Bill has tormented us fans and the Jets for decades. If he's out after this game, would be massive win to send him off with a loss from the team he hates most. This is our Super Bowl. Do you want this to be your Super Bowl? Do you really want a Week 18 game against a bad Patriots team to be your Super Bowl? I wouldn't. If I was a fan, if I was part of the decision-making process, I wouldn't. Who cares about Week 18? Who cares about sending him off into the sunset with a loss? If he's gone, he's gone. You don't have to worry about him again. Even with the loss, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He's gone. I get the torment. I get the problems. Let's also remember there are two coaches, 2 teams that have beaten Bill Belichick at home in the playoffs the last couple of years. Jets are one of them. I think you've tormented him as well. Because when the Rex Ryan days, that 2010 playoff win was stunning. Stunning. Because it had been 6 years since the Patriots had won a Super Bowl. And they went in that year, they were 14-2. They were looking like a dynamic group that was going to run the table. And you guys kicked the crap out of them. You've had your victories. You've had your victories against them. The problem is, do you want to sacrifice a Week 18 win to send Bill off into the sunset for Joe Alt, Olu Fashanu, Marvin Harrison? I understand the comment, Dan. I get it. I don't think we're looking at the big picture here. I don't think we're looking at the big picture. And that's the issue. That's the issue I have with that kind of conversation, because it's not sending him off into the sunset with a loss. Because it's irrelevant. He's going off anyway. Whether you win or lose is irrelevant. He's going off. Whether it's to Washington, whether it's to Los Angeles, Carolina, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. I don't see this team. This game is so irrelevant. It's so irrelevant, guys. It's so irrelevant to what they need. You shouldn't worry about what Belichick does or ending the curse and ending the streak. It should be about how do you improve the roster in 2024. And the only way you do that, the best way to possibly do that, is to lose this game. It's just right there. What's the difference between 6-11 and 7-10? It's Joe Alt. It's Olu Fashanu. It's Marvin Harrison. Those are legitimate problems. Those are legitimate players. Even if Belichick were to return next year, and if you beat him, if you lose to him, and you get Joe Alt, think about that matchup next year. Aaron Rodgers with his left tackle, with improved players in free agency, against Bill Belichick's Patriots, who couldn't solve the quarterback position, who couldn't get his top quarterback in the draft. It's where we are. I get it. I get the argument. But in terms of a debate of tank or not to tank, final game of the year, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Let's get to some of your comments and questions here. We got a few of them already in the chat. You guys want to call in, go right ahead. Football with Faria here at Gillette Stadium, Jets and Patriots pregame show. So let's get to it. From Rich, I know it's already been announced that the GM and coaching staff will be back, but is there any chance Keith Carter is replaced? It's pretty obvious that line is poorly coached. Injuries are not the only reason they have been bad. Okay, so double question here from Rich, and totally get it, and kind of answered it earlier today. But I do agree. I think with Keith Carter, I think it's likely that if there's going to be changes to the offensive staff, it's probably going to be offensive line. It's probably going to be strength and conditioning coach. And then I look at, what do you replace? How do you replace these guys? Who do you turn to? Jeff Stoutland is still in Philadelphia. You're not, dragging out Dante Scarnecchia. I would argue, if you're looking at some of the better offensive line coaches, see what Mike Munchak's doing. See if there's an assistant with this Philadelphia offensive line that would be willing to leave. Assistant offensive line coaches willing to leave, solving that problem. You need guys. It's not about finding guys with pedigree. It's about finding the right guys. And I think with Carter, it was more about what he did in Tennessee when they were good, as opposed to what they were doing recently. That's essentially where we're at. Next question from John. Sounds like Huff is out. What's your thoughts? Yeah, it's going to be interesting with Bryce Huff and what they do. I think ultimately, I know Rich Cimini said something earlier today about the contract extension and whether it's likely or not. I think it's a no-brainer that the Jets should do everything they can to potentially re-sign him. Give whatever money you get, because this guy's an every down pass rusher and every down run defender that really is going to continue to blossom into a star player. When you have these guys, these undrafted late round pick kind of guys, and they are blossoming into great players, you don't let them walk in free agency to pick to add a compensatory pick. You lock him up long term. You lock him up and you make sure he never goes anywhere other than the Jets. And it just makes too much sense to make this deal happen. There are ways for the Jets to open up the salary cap where you can get $60-70 million in cap space. You're going to have to restructure CJ Mosley. You're going to have to restructure Quinnen Williams. Maybe you're going to have to restructure Aaron Rodgers as well. It doesn't matter. You do all of that to make sure you have enough space to, 1, get a top receiver, 2, solve your offensive line, and 3, make sure Bryce Huff is a New York Jet. Plain and simple. From Austin. Hey, Nick, longtime fan. Thank you, Austin. I have a feeling I know who this guy is. First time listener, as everyone is. Do you think this offseason going after a receiver like Higgins needs to be a top priority? Great question, Austin. Yes, I do. And expanding on that, for Jet fans out there that I know are going to be having these questions and concerns, if you are Joe Douglas, do you go after Mike Evans, trade a first-round pick for Devontae Adams, or do you go after the veteran that wants more money in T. Higgins? And it's interesting with this comment, because I don't know if you guys heard about Jamar Chase and the comment he made earlier this week. He was talking about wanting a contract extension done immediately. And he was also saying, like, listen, T's going to get what T wants, but they may not have money to pay him. And after Joe Burrow's contract, I can totally understand it. I see T. Higgins walking out, and if you're the Jets, you do everything possible to get him. You do everything possible to get him. This isn't a number 2 that is going to be going into a number 1 receiver role. This is a number 1B receiver going to be a number 1B receiver at a different place with a top quarterback. So I think T. Higgins should be number 1, the priority for every team that needs a receiver, and that includes the New York Jets. You have to do that. Comment here from Jam. Congrats on the new show. Which wide receiver scenario do you see realistic happening for the Jets in free agency? Well, there you go. Right there. Yeah, absolutely. I do agree. I think Higgins is probably the best bet. He's going to cost a lot. He's going to cost a pretty penny. But it just makes the most sense for the Jets to lock him up. And I think if you're looking at some other options in free agency, some teams that some players that could help your team out, I'm actually looking at Quez Watkins, slot guy out of Philadelphia. Has some problems catching, certainly has his problems, route running. But you guys need big play. The Jets need big play receivers and guys that can get behind a defense and threaten guys downfield. So if you're looking at sort of cheaper options that are going to be available, I think a player like Quez would work perfectly. It really would depend on the money itself, but I don't think he's going to be staying in Philadelphia too long. He's a player that I look at. But again, top of the list, T. Higgins. If you can get Mike Evans out of Tampa Bay, you go after it. I don't see Mike Evans leaving Tampa Bay. I don't. got another comment from Austin here. Guaranteeing victories early, I see. Noted. We're going to make sure Austin's on the show in the coming weeks. I know he's sick, so we'll make sure he's feeling better before we get him on here to debate. From Dan, makes no sense to take a tight end. We don't need one. That's a luxury pick. We have other desperate needs. Draft need to be all offline, O-line, and maybe a developmental quarterback in the later rounds, free agency wide receiver. Yeah, I agree. I know a lot of people like Brock Bowers. A lot of people love Brock Bowers, and he's a great player. I just think when you look at receivers, look at tight ends, I just don't see Brock Bowers being one that you trust right away. I look at the Kyle Pitts scenario. Kyle Pitts came in top 5, top 10 pick. And the expectation was, hey, you're getting a top player. You're getting a top playmaker overall. And it just hasn't worked out in Atlanta, whether it be coaching, whether it be route running, or whatever the issues are, whatever the concerns are. It's just not happening. It's not working out. Do you really want to go through that with Brock Bowers? I think what's happening with Kyle Pitts is going to scare a lot of people off. And again, things could change. He could have a great combine. What I think now is probably going to change after the Senior Bowl, after the combine, after pro days. But ultimately, I just don't see Brock Bowers being the answer to what the Jets need. If you're going to go after a receiver in the first round, it's got to be Marvin Harrison. It's got to be a Marvin Harrison. Gator, yes, welcome. Again, big shout out to Gator here for the help with the intro and the logo. Great question here. What free agent running backs would be worth a look to back up Bruce Hall? Oh, Jesus. My God. You guys are going to kill me. Yeah, listen, there's a lot of different guys. I think with the way Hall runs, I think you could use a scat back. But you could also use a power back. You need guys that can just run upfield. And the big problem, I think, this year was you had guys that just weren't trusting what they were seeing. And I think Dalvin Cook, it took a while for him to get going. And we'll get to Dalvin Cook later on, later in the week when we talk about that stuff. But ultimately, if I'm looking at a power back that is still going to have tread on his tires, I look at Rashad Penny. Penny hasn't played at all for Philadelphia this year, and he's still very good. He averaged 6 yards a carry in like the 3 carries he's been given. I think that is an intriguing option for the Jets to maybe consider, because it's not that Penny is bad. It's just that Philadelphia's running back room, for whatever reason, has been crowded. DeAndre Swift, Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott. Those are the kind of guys that have sort of blocked Penny to this point, but he's still a quality running back. And I think if you're going to pair him with anyone, I think Izzy Abanikanda is your third down scat back. You have Bruce Hall, whatever you want to say, is your lead back, your every down back. But then you want that guy, that like Garrett Blunt, Jerome Bettis power guy that can get 3-4 yards, short yardage game, red zone game to get you those yards, get you those touchdowns. I think Rashad Penny is the perfect player to match up well with what the Jets want. Kevin Harrigan, thank you. Pitts and Powers have had 2 completely different college careers. Listen, I get it. They have. I get it. But coming into the NFL draft cycle, Kyle Pitts was seen as an athletic freak that could play wide receiver, but is a tight end. Brock Bowers has been dependable. He's been probably one of the better offensive weapons in college football. But overall, I think the tight end position is going to scare a lot of people off. I think the tight end position, because again, this is a copycat league. People will see the dependability or lack of dependability from positions and be warded off. Perfect example, I think, is the Big 12 with TCU. Last couple of years, they've sent out some really quality, fast receivers. Quinn Johnson, Jalen Reagor, and these guys have just looked awful so far. And again, it's early for Johnson. It's early for that particular receiver with the Chargers. But is anyone going to trust a TCU receiver again? There's a reason USC quarterbacks. It took a long time for USC quarterbacks to even just be considered for the draft. There are learning experiences that happen and bad examples and bad experiences that directly alter what people want in their draft selection. I think the tight end position is going to be one of them. Another question from Jim. I saw Becton said he wants to come back to the Jets because of Aaron Rodgers. Thoughts on any chance that happens? I know Rich Samini says that it's probably unlikely that the Jets even give him an offer. I think it's a mistake. I do. I think as bad and as tough an end of the year as Mekhi Becton has had, you're going to need depth along the entire offensive line. You're going to need depth along the entire group. And if this is the way where you sign Mekhi Becton to a 1-year prove-it deal, and he is okay with taking it, I would do it. I would do it in a heartbeat. We kidding? You have so many problems, so many things to fix along this offensive line. And again, fairness to Mekhi, fairness also to Breece Hall. We talked about it early on in the program today. When Breece Hall got hurt, we all knew. We talked to doctors, we talked to former players, that it was going to be a full year before he gets back to 100%. A full year. And the good thing is you're starting to see those stretches, particularly late in the year, that shows that he still can be the quality player that they are signing up for, that he was drafted for early on in the second round. Mekhi Becton hasn't played in 2 years. He hasn't. So there was always going to be an adjustment, a learning curve. Do I think that people are excited the fact that he has looked this poor the last couple of weeks? Certainly not. And I think that's the reason, that's the argument to make where Becton would go off and go elsewhere for free agency. That argument I understand because it hasn't been pretty. He hasn't improved, unlike Hall. But for 1 year, a prove-it deal, backing up a tackle, backing up Joe Alt, being the right tackle, I think that's certainly an argument. I think that's certainly a conversation to have. I think that's a safe bet. We're going to wrap up the program here. Again, we're at Gillette Stadium, Jets and Patriots pregame show. Nick Faria here with Football with Faria. Guys, let me know what you think about the show. Let me know what you guys want to see improvements on, different things. I'm open to all suggestions. We're going to try to do a show every day, probably later on in the afternoon. Just going over the news and notes from the day, pre-gaming some playoff games. We're talking about a lot about the Jets. We're going to talk about the Eagles as well. I know they've got a game at 4:25 later today. Whatever happens there, it's going to be interesting. But, I greatly appreciate everyone for jumping on the show today. Appreciate all the comments and questions. Would love to see some call-ins in the near future. We're going to get some guests on the show as well. This was obviously the first show, so we're ironing out a lot of kinks. But thank you guys so much for joining, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.